Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm here with Mason, and he has been through a hell of a lot. We have got all of his links in the description box, his socials, his channel. Please subscribe and support his important work. And it starts out with him being raised in a cult, and then the temptations of the lifestyle, a demonic battle, a fascination with the occult. Anyway, I'll let him take you through all that. Thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sean. It's I'm honored to be here. I'm happy to be to have the chance to talk to your audience. And you covered some of the bases right off the bat. Yeah, I was born into, I think it was a regular church at one point, but they pretty quickly turned into a cult, and they started believing that they were the only ones who were saved, and there was a lot of weird, freaky stuff going on there, and some. Oh man, how can I say this so that YouTube likes it? There was some unsavory behaviors towards the younger folks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And
exactly. We know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, and there was a guy who actually went to prison for that, who was like a big member of that church. So that was my first introduction. I guess I should say before I go on, yeah, Sovereign Fire Studios. That's what I do. We're a channel. We exist on YouTube and on all other platforms. We exist to edify and encourage current believers. We want to talk to the lost, so we evangelize the lost and expose the false through entertaining content. We try to produce the most, like, understand as many worldviews as we can, and really tackle a lot of topics. So we tell crazy stories, supernatural stories, guys who went from dealers to prison to being preachers, former witches and occultists like Jack Marino Chen, and authors and guys, pastors who were adulterous and got caught and were restored. We talk a lot about freedom from addiction, and we try to make it entertaining and educational. So that's Sovereign Fire Studios. Anyway,
good for you, man. And the links are all in the description box for you, so please support Mason's work.
Yeah.
If you could just expand a bit then on as a young person, you were born into this cult, did you say?
Yeah, I was.
Were your parents, were they indoctrinated into it, or was it generational? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, they joined the church. Their parents were not religious. Neither of their parents were religious, but my mom had this big conversion experience to Christianity and joined this church because they seemed to really, care about the Bible. They really, they were going after Jesus, and then it just devolved into this thing where they were isolationist. It was a really small gathering, and we basically didn't talk to or participate in the community outside of that church. And like I said before, they started to believe that no one else was saved but them, and that set me up for probably the biggest tragedy of my childhood. One of them, apart from what I mentioned before with unsavory behaviors towards young folks, they believed that if you had enough faith, that God would heal you. That, like, it was all up to you. If you just worked up enough faith, you'd be healed. And my mother contracted cancer. I don't know if you even say contracted. She developed cancer, and it was really aggressive, and she was rapidly declining, and they were all sure she would be healed, totally certain she would be healed. And she wasn't. She was not. She passed. So that shattered my little 4-year-old worldview.
Oh my God, you were only 4 years old.
Yeah, I was 4 years old, and I had 8 siblings. So I have a twin sister, and then I have 8 biological siblings, 1 half brother, 2 step siblings now. So I was really confused about the world, and I think everyone can relate to this. As a kid, you're just thinking through, like, what is reality? I was forced to think about really philosophical and strange, abstract ideas from a really young age because, like, okay, my mom is ripped from me. I'm raised in this cult that, they teach that God is good, that he's kind, but then I see in reality, it's like he doesn't seem to be. He could have saved my mom. He didn't. All this bad stuff has happened to us with all that stuff. So yeah, I was confused.
With what happened to your mum, and my heart goes out to you. I can't imagine at 4 years old. It's so important to
Yeah.
have that relationship. Did they rely purely on faith at a cost of not letting her get medical treatment? Is that what happened?
I actually am not clear on that. I know she was hesitant to pursue medical treatment. I believe she was hesitant at first, but she did eventually start doing chemotherapy because she had 9 kids. She's like, I'm gonna do whatever I have to do. But yeah, that would have been seen as kind of like you don't have enough faith. You don't have, you're not trusting God enough. It was that kind of culture. Yeah.
Okay, so you're 4 years old. You,
Yeah.
you go through the trauma of losing your mom. You're in this cult.
Hmm.
What's your life like after that
Yeah.
tragedy?
Well, that formed the way I thought about the world. I would lay in bed and be like just thinking about eternity, thinking about the supernatural. I always felt like there was this war over my soul, kind of like uh there were all these dark feelings I had. Like I in Exodus and in Psalm 103, it talks about who God gives his name to his people, and he says, I am the Lord, merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, um, and forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. So he's forgiving, he's loving, and he says, and I will by no means pardon the guilty. He's like, I'm just, I'm gonna punish the guilty. The people who deserve it, they're gonna get it. And for me, I didn't see any of the good parts. I was just like, he seemed to me like the kind of vindictive um, God who is just looking for someone to punish and is kind of like a cosmic killjoy and wants to. I feared him because I'm like, I believe you existed. I mean, Psalm talks about in the Psalms, it talks about it like everybody can see that there's something else going on here in this reality. Like we're conscious. That's incredible. That's amazing. You look at the world around, you look at the stars, the heavens declare the glory of God, the Psalms say. Like you can just look outside and be like, somebody made this stuff. Even your viewers may know about like the Fibonacci sequence or the look at your fingerprint, and all these things in nature testify that they were created by some kind of intelligent force. That's my understanding, at least. So as a kid, I recognized that, and I knew there was a God. I just didn't really think he was good. I thought he was pretty dark and mean. And I was angry all the time. Like I put all my hurt, all my trauma on God, and I hated him, and I was afraid of him. So my dad, or go ahead, Sean.
No, please keep going.
Yeah, my dad remarried, and he remarried like 6 months after my mom died because he's just like my kids need a a mom, and I can't do it. He was lost in alcoholism and in grief, and he he remarried. It turned out to be a pretty bad decision because I wanted a mom. I was ready to call this woman my mom. I called her mom. Like I wanted her to be my mother. And about 5 or 6 months into their marriage, she was like, listen, I can't be these kids' mom. I can't do it. I'm not going to try. So she detached, and my dad was already kind of neglectful, alcoholic, detached as well. And it was a painful thing for a kid, definitely. Like I just felt untethered. And so it forced me inward where I started asking these questions like, if why would anything exist at all? Like why I'm not the kind of person who wants to watch a TV show that has no point. And so much less would I want to exist in a world where there is no point. Like if everything is just nothing, we're all just kind of atoms bouncing around, doing our best, fleshy robots. I'm like, this is goofy. I never could believe that. And so then I started thinking about the concept of the creator. If he's good, he also has to punish sinners. I mean, he has to punish the worst of the worst, like Adolf Hitler. Like that guy can't be anywhere good. If he was, I'd be upset about it, you know. But then, even if he's perfect, he has to punish even the small things like lies and stealing or lusting, etc. And so I knew pretty early on. I'm like, I'm in trouble because I do all those things and worse things. From the time I was 9, I was just like immersed in shame and secrecy, all of that pain from my childhood. I just sought escapes. Like I looked for escapes anywhere, and so music was huge for me. You had a guest on that toured with Sublime. I think he I forget what his name was, but he and I thought about music similarly, where it was just like that was my whole world. Every time I would feel overwhelmed by grief or sadness or really any emotion, I would turn to music and would just listen all the time to these. And I would imagine myself like shredding guitar solos or being the lead singer. That was my dream. And so that's where that dream started to really take form in my heart. And then I found other escapes as well. Because the music I was listening to fed these dark impulses that I had, like all of the mainstream artists that I listened to. I won't say their names because it might flag you or something. I don't know. YouTube is their YouTube. So, but they glorified violence and depravity and like an attitude of like, do whatever you want, no matter what, no matter who it hurts. Just do whatever you want. That's what makes you cool. That's what makes you manly, is to just do whatever you want. And so I did my best to imitate that. And I was, as I grew up, as I was 9, I first was introduced, and I'll say this sensitively. Man, I really don't like censoring myself, but I have to every time I'm on YouTube. So I was introduced to adult material online at about 9 years old, and the internet was a much less regulated place than it is now. And so I was introduced to the most vile, dark things imaginable. Whatever you're thinking, it was that, and it was worse, is what I was seeing. And I was immediately hooked because I'm like terrified and shocked and traumatized by these images, but also I'm like, how can I get back to that feeling almost immediately? It's a strange concept, but yeah, you do return to what traumatizes you. And so I was that was another huge escape for me. And I felt like nobody would love me if they knew the things that I was looking at, the things that I was doing. So those were the two big ones. The two big escapes were music and adult material. And the things I secretly took pleasure in, really, it horrified me to think that no, if anybody knew, like if this came out that I was seeing these things, that I loved these things, I would be, no one would love me. And it just reinforced this shame of like, my stepmom doesn't want me. My real mom is gone. My dad is detached. My family's falling apart. Like I didn't mention that, but my siblings, we were all a mess. Like my older sisters were on substances. I was just running amok. And so it reinforced the fact that like I'm really dirty and trashy and nobody would love me. But I didn't know, like looking back, had I just opened my Bible, that would have helped me a lot, because like if you even just a cursory reading of the Bible, just glance at it, you'll see Abraham, lies about his wife. He's a liar. Moses disobeys God. David, David, come on. Can we, he did some really nasty things that we can't even mention here. He did the R word. He unalived someone. He was, and somehow all of these people are tied into God's story, and he redeems them. So that's the whole question of the Bible, is like, how is he merciful and gracious, slow to anger, kind to these people who deserve to be punished by him? Like, if he's really good, he's got to do something with people who do the R word, people who unalive other people. He's got to. You get to the New Testament, it's the same thing. It's like Paul he unalived folks, and he was a really bad guy. So what, how does God, how can he be just and good and also forgive these people? So if I would have opened my Bible, I would have seen verses like, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, or there is none righteous, no, not one. They've all have sinned, all have turned aside, they've altogether become corrupt. That every person stands condemned before God, and that's by nature of our birth. Like, when we're old enough to start sinning, we do it and we love it. I've got 3 little kids now, and I tell them like not to do something, and it almost is just like they're like, oh, now I want to, I can see it. And so I probably would have got some, like, at least some consolation, like, okay, I'm not the only one. But I didn't know any of that at the time. So I felt like I was the worst person on the face of the planet, and there was nobody who would love me if they knew it. And
Mason,
yeah.
if you're growing up in a cult,
Mm-hmm.
other people that we've interviewed, they think what's going on around them is normal.
Yeah.
And there comes a point in the story when they realize they're in a cult. Now, you touched on this earlier, but could you expand on that? What woke you up? How did you react to it? Was there a mental struggle? Did you consult your siblings? What was...
Yeah, that's a great question, Sean. I actually didn't realize that I was in a cult until I was much older. Like, because we kind of retained what we had learned in this system of belief, and then we went to other churches here and there. Like, my dad was semi-religious. He's like, we need to go to church to be good, and that's kind of how I felt about it too. It's like, we should all do our best to be good, and maybe we can be good enough to go to heaven, which is not the story of the Bible. We'll get into that later on. But like, I didn't realize we were in a cult until I was much older. And I mean, like 16, 17 years old. I didn't even realize, because it took a long time for the programming to fade. And I think when that happened is when I started seeing other cults, and talking to my siblings, especially my older brothers. They helped me a lot because I was young. I just thought it was normal, like you said, like hellfire, brimstone preaching, somebody yelling at you from the stage every day, going to church 4 times a week, not seeing anyone else, not communicating with anyone outside the church. That was all just normal stuff to me. So it wasn't until much later that I actually was like, wow, we were really in a bad spot.
All right, as you're going through this realization, then, is part of your brain pulling you away from it, and the other part of you still thinking, this is what I've been used to my whole life? And also, did you consult anyone within your family about this process?
Yeah, I think the thing that hit me first, because I would have considered myself a Christian even as I think I stopped when I was around 9, was into these adult materials, was really trying to escape my pain through music and through these other things, through this just fantasy world. And I I deconstructed internally, but we were all afraid to like talk about what we were realizing. Like I think the shame of what had been done to us as children, and it was a big part of it because my family was affected by that. We were all kind of subject to the evils that were done in the cult. And then, uh, and I talk more about this on Sovereign Fire Studios on some episodes I've done, but there there's this, the thing about cults is you don't realize you're in a cult because there's all these walls built up around you. You're isolated, and then once you get out, you're taught to like have your own walls. And so uh, we didn't start talking about even the things that had been done to us as children until much later, and usually under the influence of some kind of substance. We would be drinking, and we'd be like, "Hey, this, you remember this?" And they're like, "Yeah, I remember that." And that's kind of how we started consulting one another, and I started learning about other worldviews around the time I was like 10, probably. So we went to school with a lot of Mormons. We went to school with like, I learned about atheism and about New Age perspectives that kind of blend Eastern mysticism and Christianity and kind of cherry pick whatever seems best in all religions. And I kind of went down that path. I distrusted the Bible. I'd never read it, of course. I knew more than like most professing Christians about it, but I'd never like read it front to back. But I was like, it seems to me like all these religions are just, all these different cultures are seeing the same thing and pointing at it and calling it something different in their own religion, and maybe all these roads lead to the same thing, which is a great thought. It'd be cool if that were true, but these individual religions actually make claims to exclusivity, so they don't leave you the room to say they're all true. Like in this, a Muslim would never say, the Quran is very clear that all other religions are false. Mormons would even say their religion is true. Their prophet Joseph Smith was the true prophet after Jesus, and there is no other truth. And likewise, I mean, Christianity, Jesus even said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." The God of the Bible, he says in Exodus, the first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me," and not before me like above me. That means no other gods in my sight before me. Like when someone says, "Put this thing before me," they mean put it in, so that I can see it. In Isaiah, he says, "I am the Lord, and there is no other. Besides me, there is no God." And so Christianity does not leave room for you to pick what you like about it and put it in and plug it in. You can do that, but just know that it's inconsistent logic. And
Right, going back to your mental processes, then
yeah,
you realize you're in a cult. You're starting to realize it. You fully realize it, and then do you rebel against it?
oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was
What
a bad kid.
what age were you rebelling at?
Oh, I was rebelling from like the start. I mean, I was rebelling whenever I was like 5. Me and my older stepbrother would just wrestle for hours. I remember like throwing him into a barbed wire fence. So it started out with kind of acts of anger and violence, but then it developed into that part of my rebellion was the music that I listened to, this incredibly aggressive and just like hedonistic music that I knew my parents wouldn't like, and I was playing it all the time, just listening to it. I would paint symbols from like Led Zeppelin, for example. They had Aleister Crowley, who's a famous occultist. He came out of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a very popular, or one of them. It's like the quintessential occultist magical order. And I actually had a woman on the podcast who converted to Christianity from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Her name is Jack Moreno Chin. She is she's really awesome. You can go and listen to that video on Sovereign Fire Studios. That's my channel. But the your question was, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, did I rebel? That's the guy. There he is.
That's him, Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, he looks unsavory, and he was. I mean, he was, dude. He was really. He delighted in the fact that he was very evil. He at the end of his life, in fact, he was convinced that the way you honored the devil, the way you gained the most magical power, is by doing the most detestable, disgusting thing and learning to love it. So that was like the crux of his teachings, were it all pinnacled on, really, if you could do the most disturbing thing you can imagine and learn to love it, that is how you would garner the most magical abilities. And by magic, I mean, to define terms a little bit, magic with a K is basically manipulating the natural world or the outcome of events through supernatural or mysterious means. So you are dipping into secret knowledge, or convening with spirits, or these invisible beings to control the outcome of events or to manipulate the natural world. And that was what he was all about. So anyway, Led Zeppelin featured him on one of their covers, and some other occultist sayings and incantations or spells, and I would paint those on my wall. I was really fascinated with them, and that kind of got me into the occult. So I rebelled through music. I was always in trouble at school for soliciting, not soliciting. Yeah, I was the